Suicide has not been a crime here in the UK since 1961. So why do we commonly still use the term committed suicide? Committed is indicating that someone has committed a crime. Recruitment businesses are typically, as we say, sales-focused engines. That will not change. 9 out of 10 recruiters have suffered from some form of anxiety, stress, and or depression. There's a lot of people out there that are ready to put in the work. So make sure you're bringing in that talent that's got that kind of mindset and ready to put in that work.
Hi Lee, welcome to the corner.
Morning, Paul. How you doing?
Yeah, all good, mate. Thanks for coming on. Lee, I want to talk to you today about some really important topics, particularly around mental health, neurodiversity, that kind of stuff. Before we get into that, can you just give our viewers a bit of an overview of your background, where you've been and where you are now in terms of your career?
Yeah, well, look, thanks again, Paul, for having us along today. We've known each other for a little while, so it's good to come in and talk about certain topics with you and different topics and perhaps we used to speak about as well. So by way of kind of introduction and background, my name's Lee. I've been in the HR and recruitment world now for probably 15 plus years.
Don't look old enough, mate.
So I appreciate that. I feel old enough now. I feel it, definitely.
Recruitment to do that to you.
Recruitment, young children, you name it, exactly. So yeah, about 15 years in kind of HR, but with a real focus on recruitment for most of that time as well. Previously, my background was similar to you, Paul. Worked at Microdeck, Access Group, Kylo Partners. So very much in the kind of recruitment CRM, recruitment-specific technology space, right? Really enjoyed the market, really love recruitment. So, but a little bit of background there as well. In 2019, I decided to take a bit of a pivot, actually, and started to think about where I was going to really go in my career. And that was really on the back of a personal experience, right? So 13th of November, 2019, actually just a few days after I started at Kylo Partners.
Right, okay.
Right? It was literally kind of 2 or 3 days in. My sister looked to take her life.
Right.
And, you know, if I'm really transparent about that as well, it wasn't the first time that she looked to do that, but it was the first time that after the event, she came to me and shared her intent around her actions, right?
Got you.
So that was just really impactful for me.
It would be, yeah.
Yeah. It was the first time that I really took note seriously of the situation. So I just went on a bit of a journey then, right? I decided to think about how I could better support my sister, first and foremost. How as a family we could open up on the conversation a little bit more. So I then reached out to a charity called Papyrus Suicide Prevention that specialise in suicide in young adults. And that's actually anyone between the age of 8 and 35, right? And that moment there was really also that moment where I thought, do you know what? I started to understand some of the challenges, some of the data, some of the issues in that specific demographic. And I thought, it's been really great delivering a recruitment CRM for all these years, right? But how can I play a small part in kind of solving this mental health challenge we have
Good for you.
as a society globally? But still need to do that as well by servicing the recruitment industry.
Right. So a lot of people might look at something like that and think, do you know what, I want to volunteer or do something like that in my spare time, you know, to give something back. And I think that comes when you get across a certain age, you start sort of looking around. And again, I think having kids, you know, sort of grounds you a bit to do stuff like that. And all of a sudden going out at the weekend with the lads isn't important. You know, so you start putting your time into things that matter. And it might be things in the community and society. You're saying what you actually did is thought, sod it, I want to actually, as a job, I want to do this. So you started looking at careers around that sort of area.
So it started, as I say, with that experience of going into Papyrus, right? Because that was the first time, Paul, that I spoke to anyone outside of probably my wife, my mum, about my situation, my sister's situation. And I'll be like super transparent. I went in there into Papyrus. I sat down with a lady in there and I was in floods of tears, right? 'Cause it's the first time that I kind of got that load off my chest, right? And I came out the other end of that conversation that same day as a champion for Papyrus. So started volunteering for them. And I still do that today, right? So that's that piece you talk about where finding that time to give back a little bit to the community most, and that charity in particular. And it was really doing that then made me think, how can I take this a step further, right? How can I make this kind of my full-time mission? So doing it in the day job, but then also playing my part in still supporting a number of different initiatives and charities, etc., outside of the day job.
Great. And again, we'll go on to talk a little bit about, mental health and in particular men's mental health, but that's you've got a specific date, for you where things changed, didn't they? And that's, to you've gone and you've opened up about it, you've started talking about it. And again, it's, us men are great at having these little boxes of emotions that you pack all this stuff into and you put it in there and you get on with it. Yeah. But as soon as you go and start opening that up and you start sort of exploring that, which is a really healthy thing to do, those sort of things come up. Sorry to hear about your sister. How is she now?
Today she's okay. Good. That's what I always say, Paul. We got a diagnosis for my sister a couple of years back now. She's got borderline personality disorder. So again, that's like really a step forward for us in terms of understanding, one, what kind of support is available to her, and again, how we can develop our own skills, communication styles to better engage with my sister, talk about topics, but also becoming aware of, spotting little indicators that maybe she's struggling today. Yeah, and that's a really big part. We'll probably come on to some of those bits a bit later as well.
She must be pretty proud of you as well for then using that, like you said, to pivot and actually go into that as now a career and I want to become an expert in this because I can see the impact it.
I hope so.
So Lee, on the corner previously, we've touched on mental health and it was such an important topic. I wanted to do a whole episode on it, which is why we wanted an expert like yourself to come in and talk about it. Last time when we touched on it, I talked about how I feel the ability for men in particular to speak up has started to improve. I feel like there's been a bit of a shift there. Still, 80% of suicide are men, and that is a gender gap. Yeah. But obviously, there's stigma still around all types of mental health. In particular, how people go around sort of diagnosis, how they go around deal with it. Can you talk to us around, some of the stigmas and what everyone, I suppose, can do to improve, or make that better?
Yeah, thanks. And look, thanks for previously. I saw that episode, really great episode, by the way.
Thanks.
And so great to be here talking about this in a little bit more detail as well. So we'll touch on that piece you mentioned around men's mental health very briefly as well. Yeah. There is a lot of great work going on out there. There's a lot of great work in general being done around breaking down those stigmas. So we're definitely making progress. Good. Right? But also numbers, as you kind of alluded to with some of those numbers a moment ago, don't lie. Right? Suicide is still the biggest killer in men under the age of 45. Right? So there's still a lot of work to be done, huge amounts of work. But let's talk about stigmas in general a little bit as well, and some of those stigmas, and then also how we can try and create environments where men and people can open up a bit more. Yeah. So, if I think about some of the stigmas out there, I think about some of my own experiences, I think about growing up. I think as men, there's always been this kind of barrier, this stigma around it, talking about your feelings, right? And actually, I'll just say feelings for the purpose of this, emotions, not just about mental health, but emotions in general. I think quite commonly men have been seen as weak if they're talking about their emotions. Yeah.
Do you think that's a cultural or a social thing? And again, I feel like that's changed, but do you feel like that was more rife? Like I can't picture my granddad. He's dead now, so we're not talking about it anyway. God rest his soul. I could never have imagined him talking about how he was feeling. Like that's just not it just doesn't compute.
No, 100%. So I think there are, cultural challenges with it, and we'll talk about some of those in a moment as well. I think there's also a demographic type piece around it, even still today, right? There perhaps are certain demographics that still have a challenge around this, still see some weakness in this. it's definitely changing, right? I want to put that, it's definitely improving, 100%. But there are certainly still demographics that struggle with this piece. You know, I sit there and think about a young childhood experience for me, you know, when my parents divorced and my dad coming to me, sitting down next to me, and for the very first time I can ever remember at the age of 13, him sitting on the floor next to me crying because of having to leave the family home.
Yeah.
It's the only time, though, Paul, that I've seen my dad share any emotion.
Yeah.
Right, the only time. But that was super impactful on me, right? And probably even, I hadn't really thought about it till I've been on this journey recently into this space, how impactful that was on me, and also how that kind of made me think about some of those barriers, some of those perceptions around weakness. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of good work being done around that, but there's still a way to go.
I think there's definitely still a way to go. And I think each, you know, it's a very personal thing, isn't it, to open up to your emotions, even to your closest loved ones, like you say, your family, your wife, your children's a really interesting one, because, you know, for me, I've got 2 children. I know you've got 2 children, but I don't think, I mean, they've seen me upset, but they've never seen, you know, there's on a few occasions where I have been really struggling with my mental health, I will tend to take myself off. Yeah. And that might be, I will go for a run. Yeah. I might go and find a quiet spot and sit somewhere to myself, because I don't want, it's very personal to me.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily, you know, I don't feel like, and I'll talk, you know, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but, you know, to me, that if still now, I feel if my children are seeing me, you know, cry, what impact is that going to have on them? You know, because I'm constantly thinking about how my actions sort of impact other people. So it's not necessarily sort of me, you know, not helping out or, you know, being selfish. It's that, like you said, it's interesting. That's the first time you saw your dad cry. Well, obviously a massive emotional moment. You know, you go, 100%. You've got to move out your family home that I'm sure he worked very hard to try and keep together. So it's
100%. It's very difficult, and this is why I think there is great work being done. There's still a way to go, but we also have to bear in mind that with it, as you've kind of just mentioned there, Paul, we're all individuals, right? And all our emotions, the ways we are feeling, are all valid feelings, right? Are really important to highlight as well, right? So the way we understand those feelings and the way we deal with those feelings is always unique to us, right? So I think there's not necessarily a wrong or right answer, but there are definitely ways we can do things to help continue breaking down those barriers.
So talk to me about some of the, you know, you and I had a conversation in particular recently. You know, we talked a little bit about sort of a perceived weakness.
Yeah.
You know, even lack of willpower. Yeah. You know, you're scared people aren't going to be empathetic to your personal, you know, situation. We spoke a bit recently about the language piece around, you know, the stigma, which, to be honest, some of the stuff you told me, I was completely unaware of. You know, it just didn't even compute, because I suppose I've been so, you know, my exposure to mental health has been either a personal journey for myself or members of my family or people I know.
Yeah.
And that's all the exposure I've had. Yeah. But some of the stuff which obviously you've been looking at more over the last couple of years in your role.
Yeah.
So talk to me about, you know, some of the language and stuff that's that interesting piece, you know, around the stigma around that.
Definitely. So language, and look, Paul, similar to you, right? Previously, up to 4 years ago maybe now, was not a consideration for me, right? It was not a consideration. It's only when, as you rightly say, I started to really want to try and play a part in this, first of all for my sister, and then, you know, wider than that, that I started to understand the impact and the power of language. Again, the use of the term weakness, and using that in our language. What does that mean to someone? Yeah. Right? So, but if we look into a few different topics there, and it will move into some cultural pieces as well, right? Perhaps, because that's really important, the language used in certain cultures, right? But if I think about just like that topic of suicide, just for a moment, right? Suicide has not been a crime here in the UK since 1961. So why do we commonly still use the term committed suicide? Yeah, committed is indicating that someone has committed a crime.
Yeah.
But I've just shared with you, actually, in the UK,
Yeah.
it's not been a crime since 1961.
Mad to think it was a crime before that.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is, like, when you said that to me the other day when we were talking, I was just like, I never thought about it like that. And, like, literally everyone says, or everyone I know, and I haven't heard another use of the language, everyone says, so-and-so's committed suicide.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, so is there a better way it can be said?
100%. There's a few ways you can address this, right? And again, what I'm also really conscious of is even I today will slip up sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we spoke a moment ago about certain demographics, perhaps struggling with moving from seeing things as a weakness to a strength, for example, when talking about mental health. We've all been educated and learned for a period of time that certain language is okay to use.
Yeah. And whether you're brought up 70s, 80s, 90s, there's all going to... that language, whether it's, you know, about sexuality, whether, you know, transgender, whatever it is, that's almost like burnt into your brain because that's the way you've been grown up. And it's a massive thing at the moment. I'm totally up for everyone using the right language that doesn't offend or upset people.
100%. So, but just thinking about that, as you said, you know, we've had this kind of ingrained into us. It's also important to be quite forgiving to yourself in here and not kind of put too much pressure on yourself to think, am I getting all this language right? It's steps forwards, right? So even having the awareness is a great starting point. Yeah. So, but a good way to think about language to use around suicide, I also think about attempted just for a moment. What does the phrase attempted suicide potentially mean? And maybe I'll ask you to give me your thoughts on that, Paul.
I wish you'd have asked this before.
I'm pretty on the spot, mate.
Yeah, to me, like the second you said that, my brain went tried and failed.
Spot on.
Which is bad, isn't it?
Spot on. So that is indicating...
It's like his eyes tried to do something, but
they failed.
Wasn't,
they're trying to do. And failure has negative connotations to it, right? I think there's great work being done in the business world, actually thinking about failure in a certain different way and seeing the learnings from failure. But when we talk specifically about suicide, attempted could be very impactful for someone who has looked to take their life. And you see what I've done there? I've changed attempted to looked. Yeah, a subtle change, but looked doesn't necessarily have that strong association with failure. Yeah. So when we talk about committed suicide, maybe a better way of looking at that phrase is died by suicide.
Right.
Yeah. And again, these are bits that we're still learning. We're still all working on the language. But the reason it's so important is to, again, break down some of those barriers. Again, make this, more kind of a topic that is spoken about more widely. And also for the individuals, families and individuals that have died by suicide or looked to suicide, it can help remove some of those barriers, right? That fear of what is a perceived failure, that fear of what might have been an illegal action. We can remove those from the conversation so people might have that little bit more confidence to come forward and open up. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's a massive learning curve, isn't it? For everyone. I mean, me just sitting here now, I thought I've always been quite empathetic with the use of my language, in maybe not all the time, but if I'm in front of certain people, I want to be respectful in the use of my language. So I will tend to be a bit more conscious of what I'm saying, but that just never even computed.
And again, didn't to me.
No.
Before, didn't to me. Yeah. So we're all learning all the time, right? And we also shouldn't put too much pressure on ourselves to feel like we have to get it right every time. But at least if we can start thinking and become more conscious about it, that's the starting point. Yeah. If we then jump into the cultural challenges around that as well, and maybe I'll just stay on this topic around,
please,
suicide really briefly. I don't want our whole conversation today to be around suicide.
I think it's really important that stuff's talked about those. So
definitely.
Please carry on.
Definitely. But I was catching up with like a peer in the space, shall we call it, out in Saudi the other day. And again, this was a kind of a learning experience for me, right? And we were talking about the progress that's being made in Saudi when it comes to well-being and mental health, right? A lot of that is being influenced by younger demographics who perhaps have gone overseas, gone to the West to study, right? Then them coming back with their view of the world with those kind of westernized views and bringing them into Saudi, right? So there's great progress being made over in Saudi when it comes to well-being and mental health.
Which is pleasing to hear, because that's in itself, we won't go there, but can be quite a controversial topic in terms of just, you know, some of the Middle Eastern regions, countries in general,
100%.
and their view on a modern, perhaps westernized society.
They're now getting to the point where previously they wouldn't necessarily talk about mental health and use the word mental health. They'd have to soften it with well-being, right? Slowly but surely, I think they're now starting to use in terms mind health, right?
Okay.
So it's starting to progress in that respect, right? But then you've got to remember that there are a number of challenges, right? So if we think about, you know, Saudi in particular, Islam, we think about Islam for a moment.
Yeah.
Islam forbids Muslims from taking their life.
So it's not just illegal, it is
religiously, it is forbidden. It is forbidden. So you think about, again, these stigmas, the language, all those kind of bits we've just spoken about, in that environment, in that culture, in that religion, and you think about how difficult it is to kind of move the needle on this topic. It's going to take time. But the good news is the progress is happening.
It's happening. So even just the word of that, you know, the use of that word suicide, no matter how you'll put it, how you're phrasing it, that's just completely frowned upon in that religion, in some cultures, and you know, some of those Middle Eastern countries, you know, I spent some time in the UAE. Some areas are a lot more westernized than others, and are a bit more open to those changes, perhaps, than some others.
It's coming, Paul. It's coming. The change is coming. But we just always have to bear in mind that language, culture, religion, age demographics, all these play a part in some of the stigmas and barriers and work that needs to be done to open up the conversation.
I would just... one thing that was in the news just last week, actually, which sort of made me realise something as well. I always sort of put suicide with mental health. You know, someone's committed suicide, it's because they've got issues or problems with their mental health. Dave Courtney, just last week, I don't know whether you saw, obviously took his own life, but he put a really interesting video up, or his family did. So he'd recorded it just before he had taken his own life, and he's committed suicide again, because it's just so, you know, it's just the language is so ingrained. But before he took his own life, he recorded a video, and he specifically said, "I am mentally well, I'm just in pain." And he had suffered for years with arthritis, and he couldn't even get up the stairs, and he was saying how much he's enjoyed his life every day. He's had fun, and he doesn't want to be a burden to his family and stuff. And I was talking to a very good friend of mine just yesterday about it. And, you know, there's certain countries in Europe and around the world where euthanasia is a thing, and families can decide, you know, that's the right option. Does that ever come up in any of your sort of works? Obviously, there's that suicide prevention. But what I've realised now is it's not always mental health. And you think if someone has tried taking their own life and it is due to mental health, then, you know, clearly there's help there, you know, where needed. But, you know, to me it was like, oh, this person's done it because he's physically in pain and he just doesn't want to live anymore. And I think within his right to do so. And to think that there's people out there, I mean, he took like a gun to his head. I mean, that's crazy. That he would have to, that's his only option for that.
So my comment on this would be, what impact does physical pain have on our mental health?
And vice versa as well.
Exactly right. So they, you know, physical health, mental health, super closely linked, right? Super closely linked. So I'm not going to sit here and take away from what's being said, but I'm going to sit here and say that the two are so closely linked. I think there is still that work to be.
That pain's perhaps driven that mental health.
Yeah.
To me, it should just be called health, then, shouldn't it? Like drop the mental bit even, because, you know, if you just say the word mental on its own, that can be quite impactful, can't it?
It can indeed. And so you've used another word
there. He's mental.
That's a great example again, Paul.
Yeah.
Great example. And I love this, right? You're right. What does the word mental, you know, what are some of the historic uses that perhaps you and I have used in our day-to-day before when we use the word mental, right? So maybe there is also some work to be done at some point around, is it just well-being?
Yeah, but it's good because we can look what it was like, what it is now, but still clearly there's still room. There's 100%. Always room for improvement.
Definitely.
Which is really good. Okay, so Lee, we've worked in recruitment for too long.
We have a little, haven't we?
I think I've like 13, 14 years, couple of years as a recruiter, and then obviously on the tech side, and I know obviously you've racked up similar numbers across. But a lot of that time was in tech.
Yeah.
So we've had a lot of exposure to the recruitment environment. The recruitment environment typically is a very sales orientated environment. You know, it's, you know, a lot of consultants, and you know, they are salespeople. What comes in a sales environment typically are targets, KPIs, and pressure to perform.
Yeah.
Whether the market, you know, particularly if the market's down, like we're seeing a bit of a slump at the moment, so the pressure for salespeople to perform is very high.
Yeah.
Obviously, what comes with that pressure typically, and I've had it myself when I was in sales, and I, you know, coach and manage salespeople that have that same sort of pressure, is stress, is anxiety, which then can lead to, you know, depression if you have a bad few months, and you know, it can have a financial impact on your family, and, you know, you're getting pressure from your bosses and your peers or whatever. What can businesses do to sort of improve that? How can they sort of recognise things like stress, burnout, you know, and all those words it's sort of referred to?
Yeah, great question, right? Great topic this, and similar number of years to yourself in this space, but in reality it's because I love the space, right? I love the space, and this is why I'm passionate about supporting this space as well, because actually I see a lot of change happening in recruitment, right? A lot of positive change happening in recruitment, but we won't get away from that high stress sales environment, right? KPI, target driven, recruitment businesses are typically, as we say, sales focused engines. Yeah, that will not change. I don't believe.
Unless AI just takes over everything, everyone's out of a job.
And then we've got to support the AI somehow. We won't go into that too much. But, you know, there's already a lot of great work being done in the recruitment industry, right? The recruitment industry is becoming more and more aware that, you know, the impact of the, you know, constantly on environment in recruitment. Yeah. So I'm, you know, speaking to my candidates out of hours, I'm speaking to clients out of hours. It's not a 9 to 5, right? So that comes with its own challenge alone. Yeah. It's not a 9 to 5. Then I've got my targets, and I've got my KPIs. I've also got the scenario this year, as you rightly say, where it's a tougher market, right? But sometimes the expectations don't change. You know, we don't necessarily change the targets. In fact, sometimes we increase the expectation in tougher markets. We drive even harder to see results. So all of that does create an environment that can be really impactful on our well-being, right? So there's a lot of work going into addressing that. There's a great organisation out there. Shout out to Rhonda at Mental Health in Recruitment, right, that are doing some great work as well in supporting the industry. I think Rhonda done some research, might have been at the start of COVID. Rhonda will correct me at some point for this, when she done the research. But her research, she surveyed the industry, right? And she found that 9 out of 10 recruiters have suffered from some form of anxiety, stress, and or depression. So high, right? So it's high, but it's probably not. It's not just recruitment, right? That will be also numbers we could probably see in similar sales-focused organisations because of those pressures we just spoke about.
And it's that going back to that environment / culture sort of piece. You know, you would expect from a high sales press environment for that to perhaps be higher than, you know, the well-being industry, say like spas and, you know, that kind of stuff. You know, it's more of a relaxed, more environment, and, you know, but
exactly.
I'm not saying it doesn't occur, but I'm just saying the number.
The balance is different.
Yeah.
The balance is different. Yeah, exactly right, Paul. Exactly. But as I say, so I think businesses are starting to recognise that, right? Through the work that perhaps, you know, we're doing around educating, the likes of mental health and recruitment, amongst others, that organisations are recognising that. The leaders at the top of those organisations, and this is the important piece, are recognising that. Right, the leaders at the top of these organisations are recognising that challenge, and they're looking to address it. Right, so what can they do? Right, and there's some really simple things organisations can do as well. Right, first and foremost, when bringing talent into the business and managing your talent you've got internally today, be transparent. Yeah, be transparent around the challenges in the role. Yeah, so people aren't going into this with a disconnected view of what's expected of them, right? Be very, very transparent about that.
They can make that choice then, can't they?
Yeah.
Actually, I think I can do that. I just think I can't. You know, being missold a role. I mean, we do hear about it in the industry quite a lot.
100%.
Sort of sold the dream, and you can earn all of this. But what they don't say is you have to also sell us your soul, and you have to do all of this stuff.
100%. And, you know, there's a lot of people out there that are ready to put in the work.
Yeah.
Right? So make sure you're bringing in that talent that's got that kind of mindset and ready to put in that work. But if you're mis-selling that role and you're mis-selling it to someone that perhaps, you know, is not wanting to engage in that kind of opportunity, then you're going to have those challenges, right? So clear expectations, transparency, realistic targets. This year is a great example of this, right? Really great example. I think many organisations are doing this anyway. They perhaps started off the year with this expectation. They're probably on a weekly basis adjusting those KPIs and targets. But again, it's really important that we set those kind of realistic targets. Let's set KPIs, let's set sales targets that do stretch our people, but are achievable, right? So that's really important as well.
And I want to come on to the technology in your space in particular in a while, but just on that, you know, the tech within a recruitment business can play a big part in that, in terms of them being able to visualize those KPIs, those targets, how well they're doing. That's not a plug like, you know, at Itrus we do this, but I'm just saying, you know, a great tool for them to be transparent is actually using their CRM to manage those targets, and then perhaps sitting down with the consultant and here's what you're doing well. Let's look at the data.
Yeah,
we always look at the data.
Use the data to demonstrate that actually what we're setting here is achievable. We've got the data to back that up, right? We've got our top performers to back that up, and the data supporting those top performers, right? So you're completely right. Tools like Itrus, etc., are really well placed to give that visibility. But even before you think about the tools, what use is a tool if my people are struggling with their well-being? Because straight away their performance is going to be lower. Their enthusiasm to use said tools is going to be lower. So we've got to make sure we have the foundations right first and foremost, right? So again, they can do really great work in the organisations to be educating around a better balance, putting routine into your day. Your routine, especially in recruitment, will probably look different than a 9 to 5 job, right? So help your people find a healthy routine in their days as well, right? That gives them that balance. Help your people understand that actually having time away from technology and the always on culture is important for that healthy balance as well, right? So there's lots of work to be done there. We do some great stuff on like digital detoxing. And actually saying I embedded at home. I was becoming really conscious of it myself. Breakfast time, lunch times, dinner times.
There's a screen.
There was a screen in front of me while I'm sat there. You spoke about what we share with our children. Something I noticed that I was doing that was not healthy. I was sharing over those moments when I should be just engaging with my family, I was sharing it was acceptable to have a device on and be looking at it.
I've been really conscious of that, and I always, if I'm on my device, I try to do it on my own. Typically, for a guy, it's sitting on the toilet. Right?
Yes, it's
a great time to go and hide away for 10 minutes.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's some screen time.
Yeah,
but if I'm in the bedroom, in the front room on my own, and I'm on a device, and one of my children walks in, I make very conscious habits to put the device down and just be present in the moment and be present with them, because that's healthy for them. And again, I want to talk about sort of the younger mind and what we can do with that. But in terms of the sort of education in the workplace, talk to us a little bit about that and what you guys have found sort of works in terms of, obviously you've talked about the transparency, which is great, but what about sort of educating everyone on the topic? How does that work?
A few things that people can be doing at the moment there as well. So we are seeing a lot more organisations that are doing workshops, webinars around mental health, spotting the signs of someone that might be struggling. There's actually a bill at Parliament at the moment, I think it's in its first or second reading, which is looking at the role of mental health first aiders in the workplace.
Great.
So that that's something we see a lot of organisations starting to embrace.
They tend to just be larger organisations.
No,
you're seeing this across
the board. Across the board.
That's really positive.
It's really positive because let's just think about mental health first aid for a minute. We have physical first aiders, in all organisations of all shape and size, right? That person that can be there to spot that you've just fallen down the stairs, Paul, and grazed your shin, you need a plaster.
It's happened.
Right? So we've got those individuals.
Yeah.
Why have we not got individuals that can proactively spot the sign of someone that might be struggling?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because typically I will talk to my teams about their health in general, and I sort of like to try and summarise health as health.
Yeah.
Physical and mental. But I've got door open policy. They know I'm here if they need to talk. I might not be the right person for them to talk to, but I will always make a habit of bringing it up in one-to-ones.
Yep.
And try and gauge, how they are. And I feel like, one of them sitting behind there, but hopefully they feel I'm approachable enough. But I always do make a conscious effort. But it's interesting because that responsibility at the moment, or I see, is that falls on line managers. Yeah. You're their line manager, they're your responsibility. That's kind of the thing. Well, it wouldn't be the line manager's responsibility, like you said, if they fell down the stairs and broke their ankle. That'd be, who's first aid?
Yep.
Yeah. So having that right person in place within an organisation to, because we see it at schools, don't we? There's various stuff going on in my children's school. They got a great Senko department, but they have like a school psychiatrist, which is great.
Yeah.
So having that in the workplace, it's becoming more and more clear that that's probably needed, and hopefully
100%.
So if that passes in Parliament, that will become,
it's only going to drive positivity forward, I think. Yeah, exactly right. With that, just on that mental health first aid piece for a moment, I think you're completely right. It's, yes, you might have some team leaders, traders, mental health first aiders. Hopefully you might have someone on the leadership team.
Yeah.
Right? Because again, driving these initiatives from the top, showing that vulnerability at the top is really important. So that's part of the educational piece and creating that culture, creating that environment. But also, I might have a physical first aider. I might have Sally or Steve in admin that's a mental health first aider, right? But what's important with that is we need to make sure we've also got the other systems and tools in place, right? So that's really important to highlight here. Organisations should not just invest in mental health first aiders. They should also make sure that they then got the systems in place that if an MHFA does spot someone that's struggling, does have a conversation with them, understands that they're going through a really difficult time, they then need to be able to make sure that they can actually signpost that person to the right support. So therefore making sure you've not only got that expertise and that education, that skill set internally, but then you've actually got the supporting tools around the outside of that, where you can actually take that person who's struggling to professional help if needed. Yeah, that's really, really important as well. Not only for the individual that's struggling, but for the mental health first aider.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's then it's a bit of a safeguarding sort of thing then, isn't it, as well? So, we have similar with our, I coach and manage an under-11s football team. Same sort of thing. I can recognise, and I've had some very, in-depth conversations with, some of my young boys that are struggling with either a loss in the family or whatever that is. But then it's like, I know if it gets to a limit, I'm then, right, this is now a safeguarding issue.
Correct.
And it's the welfare officer that then will then pick it up. And if they then need help, it's then the Kent FA that get involved, and some similar sort of in terms of process.
Exactly right. Because what you don't want to do as that mental health first aider or whoever it is, you can only take that conversation so far.
Yeah.
Right. And rightly so.
So far you're going to want staff to be trained, before they have to have a career in it.
Correct.
Correct. To be a professional. Yeah.
Exactly right. So that's really important as well, that you've got those processes, systems, tools in place that, and that's where we're now, talking about recruitment in particular. That's where we're seeing a lot of great work. Organisations doing that educational piece, building in some of these processes, recognising that actually, this is an environment that this kind of support is needed in.
Like you say, it's there on the physical health. Yeah. Someone cuts their hand, you can do a plaster. Someone breaks their leg, call an ambulance. So the similar would be needed. How difficult is that going to be with a remote workforce?
Love it. Yeah, great question. And I love this. So this is where it's really important, actually, that we do give people this education. We do give them the skills on spotting the signs. So I'll use two great examples. I'm an individual who used to turn up, and this isn't me personally, I'm just role-playing for a moment. Don't mind me, Paul.
Do I need to get in character?
Please.
Okay.
But I used to turn up to every Zoom or Teams meeting with camera on. Yeah, as an example. I used to be on time, camera on, great. All of a sudden, my team leader has noticed that I've started to not turn up on time to some of the sessions.
Okay.
And my camera's off. Maybe not all the time, but there's a bit more of a frequency of that lateness and camera being off. Could that be a sign that something's going on?
Yeah.
Something going on at home, whatever it might be.
Yeah. It might be nothing, right?
Could be nothing.
It might be mental health related. It might be that actually
they've got building work.
Yeah.
Right? It could be though. They could be
the
building work going on.
broke on their thing. But but it's little things like that you're saying should maybe trigger or spark just that
conversation. And that's where, people can be trained to know how to approach and ask that question in that situation. And that's really important. We talk about language, like we spoke about earlier. It's being able to approach that conversation in an empathetic way that allows someone to open up if they are struggling.
Yeah.
Right?
Because it's really easy to pick up, if I'm, we're quite lucky. We all live fairly local to our office. So a lot of people are in the office a lot of the time. We still allow flexible working and work from home. It's very easy for me to pick up if someone's having a bad day, because I can read their body language and I can read the tone of their voice, and perhaps they react the way they react in situations. But if I've got someone working remotely, that would be really difficult unless they reached out to me. I wouldn't necessarily recognise. But like you say, little things. Let's think about recruitment again just for a minute, as this was the kind of, we might have an individual in recruitment that all of a sudden, they've been billing really well, great. They're coming into the office all of a sudden, and this is in an office environment now perhaps, they're coming in and we can notice that they seem to be turning up with new watches every quarter, every month, whatever it might be. They've always got something new. It seems like, yes, they're doing well. So on the surface of it, I'm a recruitment business, my top performer's performing, is it rewarding himself? Great, perfect. That's maybe what I want in my recruitment business. I want to drive that kind of behaviour in some ways. At the same time, could that individual with those elaborate purchases be actually really struggling? Jesus, don't say that. You literally described me.
but it's it could, some people will be using those rewards as a way of handling other things that are happening in their life.
I've looked quite inwards in some of my purchases more so recently. I did go through a stage of buying quite elaborate, things, presumably watches. I've got a bit of I would say it's a bit of an addiction actually, but it's also a hobby. I guess.
Yeah.
But that's shoes for me. So I have vast amounts of
I got you.
limited edition Jordan 3s today. But I have vast amounts, and I regularly would buy, limited edition shoes, and I don't often wear them. Some of them are collection pieces, but to me, looking back, it's because I come from a very deprived background, and I had double hand-me-down shoes. So to me, that's like, now I'm older and I've got money, I can have those things. But it's become a bit of a, I probably need help with it, if I'm honest. I'm sure my wife would agree.
It's really important that we highlight here. Every individual is unique.
But a lot of people would see that person coming in, and, he's doing so well, he's smashing it.
Yeah. But they could be dealing with something.
Yeah.
Right? I have the same problem, Paul, not with trainers, but I'll tell you a quick little story. The other night, my daughter was poorly, so she came in, this is my 4-year-old, came into bed with us, and she woke up in the middle of the night, as children do, and she goes to me, "Daddy, you smell like John Lewis perfume." Because I have a bit of, I've pretty much got the John Lewis perfume store in my house, because I've got this thing, right, where I like to have as many fragrances as possible. So maybe there's something going on with me there as well. But I recognise it when my daughter in the middle of the night said, "You smell like John Lewis."
Right. It's not necessarily I get a lot of satisfaction from buying and opening the box and smelling the new shoe and stuff. So it's not, I don't feel like I'm struggling in those areas. There's definitely other areas I have struggled in the past, but yeah, it's interesting that I would never see that as perhaps a trigger to ask someone, is everything okay? But I suppose what you're saying is perhaps the change in habit. They've always been like that, okay, but if it's all of a sudden the change in, habit, like the camera's on, or hang on a sec, lower purchases, or
100%
change in diet, or
change stuff. Lots of little things we can really look out for, and that's where some good work is going in, not just in recruitment but many industries, to help educate people in the workplace on how to support their peers and their colleagues. Right. So
so Lee, mental health is, as we've already covered, impacts people in various different ways, and everyone has their own personal journey. I've had a lot of family members that have had mental health issues and continue to have. I think me personally, I've had PTSD, anxiety, depression, OCD. More recent one is imposter syndrome, which is, crazy, because I've always been so confident, but then you find yourself taking yourself out of your comfort zone. It's like, can I do this? And it's a real thing, and that kind of leads to anxiety. It wasn't until I was in my 30s, which is recently.
Very recently. I can see, Paul.
So I still wear young people's clothes. That it wasn't until I was in my 30s where I actually started to recognise what these things were and seek help. So seek professional help when I was in my early 30s, and it really helped. The person I feel sorry for is younger Paul, actually, who couldn't or didn't understand what it was. So what can we as adults, as parents, teachers, societies, what can we all be doing differently to help support younger people?
Yeah, great question. And this is a real passion of mine as well, right? It's, got 2 young daughters. I see every day the impacts, the potential impact on their well-being, right, and people around me as well. And also, I suppose some of that comes from my experience in time with the work I do with Papyrus, right?
Yeah.
In particular, I'm not going to use this to go into some of the stats, which are pretty horrific.
And that's from 8 years old, you were saying, as well, up to
8
to a certain age.
Yeah, 8 years old. And look, I don't think this is the forum to share some of the stats around young people and suicide in particular. But, what I have seen there is the challenge, right? And is a really horrific issue that we have to, all of us, you said parents, teachers, society needs to try and solve for, because we're not doing enough at the moment, right? Our young generations today are probably dealing with more than we ever dealt with when we were growing up. And we all had our own experiences. You spoke about it a moment ago that you had some experiences that perhaps you then recognised later on in life that might have influenced certain behaviours and feelings. But I think there's, in today's society, digital technology is great, right? All this information is fantastic that we can get access to. But young people start absorbing this from, I think, adverts, whatever it may be on the TV, all the social content, all these different noise and channels coming at them from the age of like 3 and 4, right? So if you just take a moment to step back and think about all the different channels that can create that noise for young people now, that's a lot. That's a lot. And we never had that.
I'm glad we grew up without phones, to be honest, because I see the impact that has. I mean, imagine having social media when we was teenagers, and my children they're not teenagers yet, so they're not secondary school yet, but I know the conversations to come are around mobile phones. I mean, they're asking for them already. Of course they are, because they see us with them and they see everyone with them, and the answer's no. But once they start going off to secondary school, so your daughters are
8, coming up to 8 and 4.
Yeah. So you'll be similar. You're not there yet. They might have a device, like you said, like it's loads of devices. I'm not going to start plugging devices, but it's the social media element, I think, that scares me, and that influencer and the want for likes and
100%,
that kind of stuff.
100%. What kind of behaviours are those driving from a young age, right? And look, I'm not here saying that, as I said at the start, there's lots of benefits, but there's also this other side that I think is contributing, a contributing factor, one of many, to this challenge we're seeing with young people at the moment, right? Young minds themselves are doing a lot of great work in this.
So they are a charity.
Yeah, they're a charity. They've just, I think in the last 2 weeks I saw, there'd been at government really kind of pushing for hubs in society for young people, mental health hubs. What happened to our youth centres?
Yeah.
Do you remember our youth centres? We used to have in school. I can't think of many of those kind of real social youth centres now.
No.
But we've got clubs, right? Kids go gymnastics, or whatever. But at school,
I feel that's younger kids though, isn't it?
Yeah.
For my boy, it's Cubs. For my daughter, it's rainbows and brownies and gymnastics and that kind of stuff. And I suppose unless they, typically when you get into your teenagers, you might have a sport. So it might be football, or it might be rugby, and that's great for mental health.
100%.
Great, that physical activity is really good. That feeling of belonging to a team,
part of something,
and it's another community. And I touched on the, me managing a team of young boys. I've had them since they were 6, and it's great to see them grow and develop and be there for them when they need me. But I feel when it gets to teens and later teens and even into early 20s, because looking at what I was like when I was 21, I don't think I was mature enough to necessarily do what I was doing, have the advice. But like you said, without the youth clubs and workers and the community there to support them.
Yeah.
So do you feel like they're kind of just on their own?
I think they're not on. I think lots of work is being done, so it's really important to say.
Good.
But there's so much more that needs to be done for young people, right? We as parents need to take more responsibility. We touched on it earlier. I've made that decision to not, switch off devices at certain time. It's a small step, right? It's a small step to try and help them build healthy habits, because they learn from us, right? They learn, but then we can do those things. So we can do those things. We can put in those healthy habits. We can try and talk a little bit more about emotions, right? And being able to articulate that if you feel angry about something, you feel bad about something, you're anxious, those are completely valid emotions to feel. So there's some great books out there for young kids as well. I've got one with my daughter at the moment that's all about exploring emotions, right? And it also then gets them to do little activities, right? To try and articulate that, okay, this person had this experience, they might be feeling this emotion. What can they do to then kind of address that emotion? And what should other people be supporting them with when they're feeling that way? So there's some really great books for young children out there as well. So if we can start using things like that, that can be helpful.
Right.
But then it has to continue in society and in the education environment as well, because we can do as parents all that great work at home, and many of us are doing that.
Yeah.
Right.
We're taking the time, right?
We're not with them all the time. Right. When they're in school, they're then learning from their peers, certain behaviours. They're learning from their teachers, right? So again, we need to make sure that the education system has got the processes, funding, support in place. There's a lot of great work as well going into the education sector at the moment. We touched on it earlier in this this episode, actually, where there is a drive to get, X percentage of schools to have people that specialize, like counsellors, etc., in place to support young people and the teachers, because actually, they're struggling themselves as well, right? I think the target from government was that 30% of schools should have a counsellor on site. It should be 100%, right? Simple as that. But
even if it's not necessarily every day, if there's, maybe you'd have one between 5 schools, so they're at a school a day, a week, or something like that.
Yeah, but then there's work going on there. So that's the positive news, right? Because it has to. Because if we do all this work as parents, and then they go into school, and that learning isn't continuing, that support isn't there, those kind of healthy behaviours aren't being replicated, then it's going to be a challenge, right? And then it goes further than that. And then when they're out there in the community, right, how is community, how is society indicating what is acceptable behaviour? How do we explore our emotions? What's right and wrong? Back to the language pieces we spoke about earlier. So it's all those kind of 3 areas that we really need to focus on to ensure that the right support, the right education is in place for young people.
Nice. Let's go straight on to the tech side. So in particular, with what you're doing now, we come from a very techie background.
Yeah.
I didn't historically, but certainly the last 12 years has been very techie. What role does technology play in all of this? And I suppose in particular with what you're doing now with businesses.
Yeah.
We touched on the CRM side earlier, but aside from that, what tech is available? What, how is AI helping, with all of this?
I just put a real downer on technology in the last piece, didn't I? The challenges around technology. But in reality as well, there's lots of opportunity, lots of good that comes from technology. And that's what I'm super excited about as well.
Good.
Just touching on the young people again, just for a moment, there's organisations out there like Talk Life and Kooth, for example, that are using technology to build out communities for young people to specifically engage on and share and talk about their experiences in a controlled environment, right? So, almost like social media type platforms, networks for young people to come together to talk about their experiences and get that support. So that's a really great use of technology that people can relate to, that they will continue using, but can serve a real purpose for a certain demographic.
And I think it's about educating people on that then, because some parents will hear that, it's like social media, but for this, and some people just go, no, I don't want them using it. So it's about educating them then on the benefits of that tech, which we talk about through change management in the professional world all the time. You've got to sell the benefits to the users and the key stakeholders. And in this scenario, we're talking about the kids and the parents and,
100%. So you've got to continue to do that educational work. Yeah. As you know, that's sometimes the most challenging and time-consuming part of getting people to adopt technology, right? If we come into the workplace then briefly for a moment, there's obviously organisations like mine and Emplomind, right, where we're working with businesses and using technology to really fast track the access to support that people get, right? So the ability for someone to register on a platform, get matched with a therapist, counsellor or coach, depending on what they want to work on, and then being fast tracked into that support process, right? Technology can play a great part in that, because if you think about NHS for a moment and some of our current processes in society, I've got to take the first brave step to go to my GP. I could be waiting weeks to that GP appointment, right, in the first instance. I'm then getting told I need to see a counsellor. It could take up to 6 weeks to then see that counsellor. And then maybe I have 1 or 2 sessions with that counsellor, and I've not built up a rapport for whatever reason. So I fall out of the process and have to go back to the start of that journey, right? All that time, stressful. I'm not getting any better though, which is the most important thing as well. It's stressful when actually it's been detrimental to my mental health rather than the other way round, which is what I'm looking for. So technology can really play a part in, that accessibility and fast tracking people into the right support. So that's kind of one really great use case. You've then got lots of kind of self-help tools. There's a great business out there called Shura that's kind of built out some technology, built out an app that really allows me to educate myself, build up resilience, build up my own skill set around mental health in areas such as like meditation, resilience, breath work, all these kind of areas, right? And again, I can put that into the hand of an individual and they can be practicing and learning those behaviours on a day-to-day basis, right? There's another couple of cool businesses I should probably shout out in this one as well. So there's people like Finwell, right? Financial well-being is a huge topic at the moment, right? One of the leading issues in terms of impacting mental health, contributing to stress, etc. So they've built out a fantastic business, which is really all about going into the workplace again with two areas, education and technology. Yeah, really they're a team of experts that are really breaking down what could be perceived previously as difficult topics, hard to learn topics around financial well-being, pensions, mortgages, all those kind of bits that we typically don't learn about at school.
Yeah. And it's stressful then, isn't it? You know, I was self-employed as a teenager. Yeah. And like the thought of you got to do tax return, you got to pay taxes, you got to rent somewhere, you got to pay bills. It's like, I didn't learn any of this stuff.
100%.
So it's good all that's changing. And I do believe they should be teaching that sort of practical sort of advice in school.
100%.
So that was Finwell.
Finwell, yeah. And they, as I say, that they're a fantastic business that's got experts there, but also got that technology platform to help drive that engagement and that education, right? So that's another really great use of kind of technology. And if we think about kind of AI for a moment in particular as well, and the advancements with AI, what I will put out here first of all when it comes to AI, as everyone does that's in the AI space, this is not to replace the human, right? But especially when we think about therapy or counselling, for example, the value comes from that human connection and their expertise, right? But can AI play a part in, again, ensuring that we can get people to support they specifically need very quickly? Yes, it can, right? Can it improve that matching process, all those kind of bits? Yes, it can help with that. Can it help to educate people very quickly? Yes, it can, right? I also sit on the advisory board for a business called Ripple Suicide Prevention, and they're a charity but got kind of a tech arm to them, and they've built out fantastic technology that is so simple, Paul, right? And so simple. It's designed to, if I go onto Google and I'm putting in a search term for some harmful content, right? It's designed to intercept that and then signpost me to hope.
Right.
So just a really simple message pops up that says, hey, you searched this harmful content.
Yeah.
Why don't you consider reaching out to Samaritan's Papyrus?
Yeah.
Whoever it is. Such simple technology, but how powerful for someone in that moment.
At the right time as well. That's like, that is where, that targeted, I mean, it's marketing, isn't it? It's everything we learn about in our industry about, targeting marketing, but it's always used, in my view, for selling and for brand awareness and that, but actually really be used to help people. Tech can be good. It can be damaging, but it can be good. I was reading something recently about, the advancements in AI and in particular home tech and home devices and how they're looking at, how even just your habits within your home and the things you're watching can really pick up on your mental well-being and then again start sort of advising you to, you've missed your routine today. So it's a little bit like we were talking about earlier about how humans, we can pick up on if someone's not got their camera on or if someone's a bit late, for your tech in your home to start picking up on these and, hang on, there's a change in behaviour here. This might mean this. And
100%.
Delivering that.
100%.
I'm quite excited to see where, as much as AI can be very big and scary, I'm excited to see where it goes in those particular sort of sectors and that kind of stuff. Because the benefit, if the right companies are investing in it, if the right bills are passed through Parliament and that kind of stuff, there's masses that can be done.
It's got a huge part to play. Because as we know, resources are tight, funding is tight. So how can businesses, how can innovative charities like Ripple play their part through technology in plugging some of those holes where human capital is less available?
Yeah, exactly. There's masses here we could talk about, Lee. There's a lot which gives over, and perhaps we'll have you back, for another session. One thing I did want to cover is just to kind of summarize, I guess. There is a few things we've skipped out, but what do you feel is the sort of number one thing businesses can be doing now to make a change now? Because we talked about what things were like in the past, where things are at now, and what the future might look like with technology and all these things. But, as a business, if you took our business as an example, what could we be doing now to improve or recognize, people's mental health in our organization?
Great question. And really simple, actually. First of all, make sure that you recognize this is something you can play a part in solving, right? Okay. Really simple. Make sure you recognize the importance of this topic. Make sure it's on the agenda, right? So that's first and foremost. Mental health support, well-being support it affects everyone. It impacts every one of us, right? And I think we've had a conversation here today where we 3 or 4 of us have articulated we've had these experiences. So just by being aware of that actually it does impact every single one of us is a good starting point. Rather than me 3 or 4 years ago burying my head in the sand, put your head up here, right, and recognize the impacts. So that's kind of the starting point. And then it's to make sure that you're really looking at your business and looking at your people and understanding that each of those individuals is also unique and has their own unique needs, right?
And that goes back to the cultural, the language, so if you've got a diverse workforce, age, religion, that kind of stuff. So just being aware that it's not necessarily
Start with recognizing that mental health in the workplace is not a nice to have. It's not an employee benefit, right? Recognize that actually mental health in the workplace is essential and is something you should just do. Make sure you provide the support. Make sure you set your business up to support your people, right? That's the starting point. And then build out from there. Recognize those diverse needs. Everyone's unique, individual, right? They're at different stages in their life, which impacts what they need, etc. They're different cultures, whatever it might be, Paul. So those are things you can do straight away today. And then obviously you can start building on that. Those should be the foundations. Then you can start building. You can start looking at technologies that can reach your people where they are with the needs they have. You can start putting in place educational work to train people in certain areas so you've got that skill set and open up the conversation internally.
Great. And listen, genuinely, thanks for your insight. That's been really, it's been beneficial just to me as an individual, actually, just talking to, I know we've had brief conversations over the last few weeks and when you come down the other week, but actually hearing it in more detail has really benefited me. It's opened my mind up to stuff. Hopefully it has done some of the people and some of the viewers. I genuinely hope that this video gets loads of views, not for my own vanity, not for our marketing, not for our YouTube channel or anything like that, but just to spread that awareness of because some of this stuff it's just never spoken about sometimes, and it often is. And like you said, it's getting better, but there's some of the, we're going to include links to some of the charities you've mentioned, some of the platforms you mentioned. All I would say to the viewers, obviously, if anyone is struggling, reach out to these charities. Reach out to me personally. I'd be happy to have a conversation with anyone about mental health or anything like that. But mate, thanks for coming on. It's been great.
Paul, cheers, thanks very much, mate.
Yeah, cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks.